Chairman Ray, we have assembled here, and I think we are ready to get started when you are.
Thank you, Ken. Well, and thanks for taking the time to be available. Specially called meeting. I'll ask our new corporate secretary, Ken Lott, take the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And after taking a roll of the board, we'll also take roll of any guests that have joined us today by phone. Director Clark.
Present.
Director Finn.
Here.
Director Floyd.
Here.
Director Land.
I'm here.
Director Laird.
Here.
Director Mudge.
Good morning.
Director Pennell.
Here.
Director Singleton.
Here.
And Director Wynn.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you do have a quorum of the board. Briefly, let's take account of others that have joined us by phone. Do we have any representatives from Bank of America on the line?
Yes, this is Chris Fink from Bank of America.
Public Financial Management.
Yes, you have Mike Mace from PFM.
Nixon Peabody.
Yes, you have Liz Colombo from Nixon Peabody.
Oric Public Finance.
Yes, Kevin Roach.
Is there anyone on the line that has not been given chance to recognize themselves?
Hi, you've got Chapin Snyder and Brian Middlebrooke from Barclays on.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, in addition, in the room here, we have friends from Berkeley Electric Cooperative and Central Electric Cooperative joining the Santee Cooper staff.
Okay, thank you, Ken. For those on the phone, when you're not talking or voting, if you would, just put your phone on mute so that we can minimize the amount of background noise. That would be helpful. At this point, I'll turn the meeting over to our CEO, Mark Bossel.
Thank you, Chairman Ray. This is the second installment of the major financial transactions that were contemplated in the business plan that was approved by the board on September 9th. The first such transaction was a cash defeasance of roughly $360 million worth of debt, and this transaction refinances to a lower interest rate for savings purposes a goodly amount of remaining debt. We are very pleased to present this to you for your consideration this morning and certainly encourage your approval of this transaction. I want to compliment staff. This was a complex, difficult transaction to put together. They did a superb job of doing that, and I think the results speak for themselves. And with that, let me turn it over to Pam Williams for some remarks. Pamela.
Thank you, Mark. I too want to thank all of the folks who came together to get this deal done, including, most importantly, the Treasury Group, Shawan Gillens and her team here internally, as well as our underwriting team, our bond counsel, our financial advisor, and also want to thank the Department of Administration who worked with us to allow us to do this deal, which will benefit all of our customers. So for a description of the transaction, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Fink, who's the Managing Director of Bank of America Securities. Chris.
Thank you, Pamela, and good morning. And first and foremost, I want to thank the authority and the board for the opportunity to lead this deal, which was very successfully received by the market. Now, this deal was different than the normal fixed-rate deals that the authority has done in the past, where we set a price and a yield, and that price and yield stay constant throughout the maturity or to the call date of the bonds. The deal that we priced yesterday was a variable rate deal. In that case, we set an initial interest rate, as we did yesterday, and then every week that interest rate will reset based on then market dynamics. The holders will change over time depending on those market dynamics. And at different points during the year, you will have different holders in part based on their availability of funds to invest in the short run. So with that in mind, we tried to get a wide distribution of buyers from day one to increase the likelihood of demand going forward. And in fact, we're very pleased that we received orders for over $258 million of bonds for a transaction size of $163 million. This included money market funds, bond funds, and individual investors. In transactions like this, it's very normal for money market funds to be the primary investor base, and that's what we saw here. But we also got bond funds because this deal is a little different, had a little incremental yield from a normal variable rate deal. So we got them to participate, which is great. We also got some individual participations. And this is, when we say individual investors, these are different individual investors than we would see, for example, on your mini bond program, because the minimum denominations in this transaction was $100,000. So these were the higher net worth individuals, which will be important at different points of the year when the bond funds or the money market funds don't have as much demand. So in addition to the ones who participated, we had a number of buyers who approved the credit, but as I said, they just didn't have any excess funds to invest this week. So all in all, we were very happy with the participation. People who put in orders received most of what they had asked for. And the yield that resulted from the transaction was a 1.19%, which is right in line with the market and what we've seen for other transactions that were priced this week. So thank you very, very much for including us, and we look forward to even lower rates as we go forward. And I would be glad to take any questions that the board or the authority would have.
All right, hearing no questions, I would now like to introduce Mike Mace. Mike is with Public Finance Management, or PFM. He's our financial advisor to advise the board. Go ahead, Mike.
Good morning. As Chris pointed out, this is a little bit of a different wrinkle than the traditional fixed rate transactions that the authority has done. The rates on these bonds will be reset every week, and they'll be based largely on other short-term interest rates, things like Fed funds and T-bill rates, but these will bear a lower interest rate than those, or should, because these have the interest that is tax exempt. So we would expect rates on these to continue to be low as long as the Fed doesn't change its course. So this should be a very effective program for the authority and produce the savings that have been outlined. And we, as the financial advisor, certainly recommend that you approve this transaction, and we would be glad to take any questions that you might have.
Hearing no questions, I'd now like to introduce Elizabeth Colombo with Nixon Peabody. They served as our bond counsel for this transaction. We appreciate their efforts very much. Liz, if you would describe to the board the resolution that we are recommending.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Before you this morning for consideration is for the adoption of the 47th series and supplemental resolution, which is authorizing the issuance of $163,005,000 of variable rate revenue obligations, 2019 tax-exempt refunding Series A. This resolution is supplemental to and will be part of the authority's revenue obligation resolution, which originally adopted back in April 26, 1999. As permitted by the Act, the revenue obligation resolution authorizes the issuance of bonds in one or more series for any corporate purpose of the authority, and these bonds would be payable solely from revenues of the authority's system. This 47th supplemental resolution authorizes and delegates to various officers of the authority the power to make the determinations and certain determinations as to the terms of the 2019 A bonds, and to prepare and execute the required documents, and to do all things necessary or convenient in connection with the sale and issuance of such bonds. As mentioned by both Chris Fink and Mike Mace, The 2019 A bonds are going to bear interest at a variable interest rate. Principal and interest on these bonds will be payable from amounts drawn under a letter of credit that is going to be provided by the Bank of America. As a result of the variable rate structure and the letter of credit provisions, this resolution is probably longer than what you may have seen before because it contains provisions for the resetting of the variable interest rate and the various mechanics and customary provisions for bonds that bear interest in the variable interest rate modes. While the supplemental resolution does provide for several different interest rate modes, the 2019 A bonds will be issued initially in the weekly mode, and the interest rate will reset weekly. There are several forms of documents that have been attached as exhibits to the 47th supplemental resolution, some of which you may be familiar with from prior fixed rate refunding transactions, and some of which are specifically required in connection with the issuance of variable interest rate bonds. The exhibits that are attached to this resolution include the form of an official statement, which will be used in connection with the marketing and sale of the 2019 A bonds to investors. It contains information about the authority and its operations and a description of the 2019 A bonds. It also includes extensive disclosure about summary units 2 and 3 and a description of the ongoing litigation involving the authority. Also attached is a form of the escrow agreement that's used to establish the trust account into which the bond proceeds that will be refunding the mini bonds will be deposited into and will be held there until the payment of those bonds in January. A form of the bond purchase agreement containing customary terms and conditions for the negotiated sale of the bonds on the closing date to the underwriters is also included as an exhibit, as well as a form of the continuing disclosure agreement that's required by the securities laws to enable the underwriters to purchase and sell the bonds. This continuing disclosure agreement obligates the authority to provide updates to certain information in the official statement on an ongoing basis while the bonds are outstanding. There are 3 other documents that are attached, or 4 other documents that are attached, that are specific to the variable interest rate bond products. One is the form of reimbursement agreement with the form of letter of credit and the fee letter. Bank of America, under their letter of credit, will be advancing monies to pay principal and interest on the bonds directly to investors. This agreement provides for the obligation of the authority to repay the Bank of America for advancing such monies and the terms and conditions for such advances. There's also a form of the remarketing agreement. This appoints Bank of America Securities as a remarketing agent to determine the weekly interest rate and to remarket any bonds that are tendered for purchase by any bondholders, and a form of the tender agency agreement that appoints the trustee as the agent to whom the owners of these bonds will tender their bonds. This facilitates the tender and purchase process for variable rate bonds while they're in such mode. One final note in connection with the preparation and structuring of this transaction that we wanted to bring to your attention. We were very careful in working with the underwriters and the financial advisor, as well as all the other parties to the transaction, to carefully structure the transaction and to make sure that the documents addressed and were in conformity with any of the concerns expressed by the Department of Administration in connection with the undertaking of this transaction. And specifically, the issuance of the bonds will not increase the cost of defeasing the authority's debt going forward. These bonds will be callable at par at any time and do not increase the outstanding principal amount of the authority's debt. And further to the DOA's concerns, there are no covenants or conditions that have been included in the documents which could impair or impede the DOA process. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about any of the documents that have been attached or the resolution itself. And thank you for the opportunity to work with the authority.
Any questions for our bond counsel? If not, this is Barry Wynn, Mr. Acting Chairman Ray. I've reviewed the recommendation of management and PFM, our financial advisor, and request approval of the 47th Series and Supplemental Resolution, Variable Rate Revenue Obligation 2019 Tax Exempt Refunding Series A.
Thank you, Director Wynn. I have a motion before us. Do I have a second?
This is Director Singleton. I'll second.
Okay. I heard a couple of voices, but I clearly heard Director Singleton second the motion. So we have a first and any questions or comments from the board?
How is the principal retired?
Here,
Yeah,
Mark or Pam?
here, talking to the microphone.
Director Laird, I think, so is who asked the question. The principal is retired you'll note in the OS, there are mandatory sinking funds, and that will be the course upon which the principal is paid down.
And
That's on a yearly basis.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, and this is
I think I noticed a bit earlier that in our board books, there's actually a schedule that shows the annual principal pay down and the ultimate retirement of the debt. What's the final maturity on this one, Dewan?
2036, sir.
Okay. So this amortizes and fully pays off by 2036, correct?
Yes, sir. We've set so that it was match maturity to the currently outstanding mini bonds.
So yes, Director Laird, it replaces the mini bonds that are currently outstanding with securities at a lower interest rate of like maturities.
I understand.
This is Chris Bank from Bank of America once again. If I can add to Shawan's comments, we do have a final maturity of 2036. There are mandatory retirements prior to that. But one of the additional benefits of variable rate debt like this is that you are able to pay this off at your discretion early with no penalty on any interest payment date. So the authority could decide, unlike a fixed rate deal where there is call protection, the authority could decide to pay it off early if so desired. So you don't have to use that, but you have that option.
Thank you, Chris. Any other questions, comments?
Chairman Rave, Steve Mudge, I've got a question.
Okay.
I just wanted to be sure. I know we're looking at disclosures really well, but in light of the litigation and where we are, just want to be comforted we really scrubbed any required disclosures.
Yes, sir, we did. And Nixon Peabody, we have Liz on the phone with us, and one of her colleagues acted as disclosure counsel. So we have outside disclosure counsel we've been working with over the last 2.5 months to make sure that the disclosure in the official statement is full and accurate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Mudge. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, I'm going to ask Ken Lott to take the roll, do a roll call telephonically, please.
Yes, sir. Director Clark.
Yes.
Director Finn.
Yeah.
Director Floyd.
Yes.
Director Land.
Yes, sir.
Director Laird.
Yes.
Director Mudge.
Yes.
Director Pinnell.
Yes.
Director Singleton.
Yes.
Director Wynn.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the resolution is passed.
Thank you, Ken. Obviously, we have a unanimous motion. It passes. Let me ask Mark Boswell, is there any other matters before us today?
No, sir. No,
Okay.
sir, there are not.
Well,
We appreciate your approval.
Thank you, and thanks to everybody for all their hard work on this. I know there's a lot going on, and this is just another one of the steps in the process that Mark and his team have laid out before us over the last few months. So thank you for taking the time, And with that, I will adjourn the meeting and look forward to seeing everyone over the next few weeks. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.